Politico White House correspondent Eli Stokols is in Arlington, Virginia. Eli, so what do you make of the signing of these executive orders and the president withdrawing the United States from TPP?
Well, he's making good on a lot of campaign promises. I mean, also this comes at a time, the lawsuits swirling, the CIA and intelligence community's investigations of the Trump campaign's dealings with Russia. All these things are still swirling around him as he enters office. And so I think what he's trying to do here is follow through on a promise to take action on day one. And he's doing it really to satisfy the core constituencies that put him in the office. The Mexico City, the abortion thing, that is something that every Republican has done, and every Democrat has reinstated the funding for the overseas organizations that do go to provide abortions. So that's really sort of an easy thing that this president can do to show the social conservatives and evangelicals who voted for him that, look, I'm with you on the question of abortion. With trade was maybe one of the top two, not maybe, was one of the top two, and maybe the top motivating issue for Trump voters that really expanded his appeal across a lot of the Rust Belt, with those workers who really felt in a globalizing economy that no matter how hard they work, they can't get ahead. So he campaigned on pulling out of TPP. He campaigned against NAFTA. And even though these are largely symbolic gestures here on Monday morning at the White House, they do show that he is delivering for those constituencies. And he's doing so. He said he would change the way Washington worked. So the hiring freeze is part of that. So this is Donald Trump following through on a lot of the campaign rhetoric, sort of plucking the lowest hanging fruit in terms of executive orders, and doing so at a time when there are a lot of other controversies swirling, including that that has been sparked by his own press secretary's mendacity, brazen mendacity on Saturday night. And so before the briefing, he's sort of giving reporters other things to ask Sean Spicer about in terms of the agenda that this administration will set that will probably help, put Donald Trump and the narrative around this new administration a little bit more on track in terms of where the West Wing wants it to be. And
we'll certainly be looking for that briefing, which should happen within the half hour. Eli, I got to ask you, though, it's a busy day for the president. Later this evening, he's going to welcome a bipartisan group of congressional leaders to the White House. It's his first gathering with them since taking the oath of office. What do you expect the focus to be on as this new administration sets out to pursue their agenda like they did this morning?
Well, I think that, Democrats have said, look, if there are areas where we agree with the president can work with him, we will work with him. And one of those is infrastructure, clearly. That's really a priority that this president seems to have that aligns more closely with a Democratic agenda than a Republican one. Republicans have not been all that excited about the idea of spending $1 billion on infrastructure projects. So I think the progressive groups at the White House will probably talk a little bit about that. There'll be some back and forth, I would guess, on tax reform and certainly on Obamacare. Trump, he kind of goes whichever way the wind is blowing in terms of the statements that he makes and the interviews that he gives. But, there have been a lot of mixed signals on what he's going to do related to Obamacare in terms of whether any sort of replacement that comes from Congress and that he signs into law actually offers coverage for everybody or just access to coverage. I think there'll be a lot of negotiating and discussion of that because I think that is clearly tops on the president and on Congress's agenda right now.
Eli, when President Trump was signing those executive orders, you heard a question that was asked of him about this ethics lawsuit that's against him. Explain to our viewers what that is. It's sort of complicated. It's this watchdog group that is suing the president for a violation of the Constitution, which the Constitution does allow for. What do you expect that will mean for the president going forward?
Well, I mean, it's hard to know. I think if you take the Constitution literally, that's what this lawsuit is asking the courts to do. And if you take the Constitution literally, it says that there are there are conflicts of interest here with the president who has not fully divested himself and his family from his business interests and can't really profit from the presidency. That said, the president believes very much that he's consulted with attorneys and that he has sort of immunity because he is the president. This is a sort of new area for the country to be in because it hasn't really been tested in some time like this. You haven't had a billionaire coming into the White House with such, vast business investments and dealings all across the world with the countries that he'll be dealing with as president. So I think these ethics attorneys, just by filing the suit, are really trying to keep this in the news. hard to really know what shape this takes as it moves through the legal system. But it will be a lingering headache for this president because the questions that are still unanswered, those are not going away.
Today also, Eli, we're going to see a confirmation vote for some of the president's cabinet picks. Rex Tillerson among them. Today, as you know, Senator Marco Rubio, one of Vladimir Putin's staunchest opponents in the Senate, said he would be voting to confirm Mr. Tillerson. So does that mean that Tillerson is now in? I don't see any potential roadblocks to his nomination going through. But the bigger question is, are there any picks that are still in jeopardy? Perhaps, for example, Betsy DeVos.
We don't know about Betsy DeVos or some of these other ones that we haven't even really gotten too deep into the hearings for yet. But I think it is safe to say that Tillerson will get through. I think if you step back from this, we've talked a lot about the honeymoon phase that Donald Trump may have, especially with the Republican Congress. And you saw John McCain, Lindsey Graham, and Marco Rubio really express deep reservations in their questioning of Rex Tillerson related to his coziness with Russia at a time when the intelligence community believes Russia was hacking our own elections. And really Tillerson's unwillingness to criticize Putin, the similarity of his words to Donald Trump's rhetoric on Russia, that raised a lot of red flags for those 3 Republican senators. And at the end of the day, all 3 Republican senators are going to vote for Rex Tillerson to be confirmed as Secretary of State. So it just tells you that there is not a hearty appetite among Republicans on the Hill to cross this president quite this early on in his administration. In another situation, if he were replacing a Secretary of State, 3 or 4 years into his presidency, and maybe Trump didn't have the political capital that he has now, or they'd worked with him and things that sort of the relationship had deteriorated, then maybe they would sort of vote their conscience and vote against him. But right now, I think Mitch McConnell is really pushing his members to preserve the goodwill that the Senate GOP caucus has with this new Trump White House, and so they may be able to sort of accomplish bigger things together. That's the end goal, the sort of pragmatism that is pervasive in the Senate, and I think that explains these votes by these 3 Republican senators who maybe in another circumstance would have found the courage to vote no.
Politico's Eli Stokols, as always, my friend, we thank you for your reporting.
Thanks, Vlad.